Hey, everybody, welcome to the Rooftop Podcast. And this is a very, very special podcast to wind up the year 2022. It is my honor to have the gentleman on this podcast that we do. I want to start by going back to a time in 2001. I was a senior captain in Army Special Forces at that time, stationed at Fort Bragg. And it was in September, and we had just learned that our country had been attacked in one of the worst terror attacks in American history. Thousands of our citizens died in the World Trade Center and in the Pentagon and in a field in rural Pennsylvania. And I remember turning to my wife in that moment as our youngest boy sat playing in the floor at 3 years old. And I looked at her and I said, it's never going to be the same again. And she couldn't even find words in that moment. And it wasn't ever the same again. We learned a lot of things in the days that followed. And one of the things that we learned was that a warrior in the northern parts of Afghanistan who had been fighting against the Soviets and then had shifted the fight to fight Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, had been trying to warn the United States of an impending attack over and over again. He requested support, he requested help. He was really the only one fighting this terror group known as Al-Qaeda as they continued to grow and gain more power and plan what would be the worst attack on our nation's soil. It was just a few days before that attack happened that this resistance leader, known as Ahmad Shah Massoud, the Lion of the Panjshir, was killed in a suicide bombing by the leader of the very group who would launch an attack 2 days later on the United States of America. And it was only after the attacks that even those of us in special forces started to learn about this. We started to learn how much this individual was trying to tell us, how much he had to say, and that he was immersed in the fight and that we didn't listen. Now, fast forward years later, in a 20-year war in Afghanistan, the other gentlemen that are on this call today, Congressman Mike Waltz, a native of Florida, who is an active congressman right now, and is also the first Green Beret to serve in Congress. Mike got the call to deploy to Afghanistan and was deployed there with his team. I served with him in Afghanistan there, and it left certainly a mark on him, as it did many of our other 775,000 U.S. Afghan combat veterans. And lastly, our guest legend, who was an Afghan American, but also an Army NCO, who had served with honor in Afghanistan and went back into Afghanistan after the collapse to recover members of his family, but ended up helping hundreds of at-risk Afghans, including American citizens and permanent residents, find safety. And he continues to this day to be very active and involved in assisting with the humanitarian effort and also with those who would resist in that country. And finally, the guest that I'm super excited to have with us today, Commander Ahmad Massoud, the son of Ahmad Shah Massoud, who is continuing the fight, is continuing the resistance, the leader of the National Resistance Front, who is really the only group right now actively resisting the Taliban and the other violent extremist groups in that country. All of these gentlemen, marked by what happened in Afghanistan, continuing in their own way to push back and stand up against what has been a growing threat in that country since the collapse, and frankly, an institutional failure in how we stood by them as a nation. So I've asked them to come on today, and really what we're going to focus on today is I'm calling this deja vu all over again, is why should Americans care about what's happening in Afghanistan? Why should they care about what's happening with the resistance? It's fallen from the news, it's fallen from our focus, but the people on this podcast believe you should care, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I'd like to start by welcoming all of you. Commander, thank you so much for being with us today. How are you, sir?
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I'd like to first and foremost to say hi to all the viewers, and also to express my greetings to Congressman Waltz. I just saw the camera and the video, who has been staying and standing with the people of Afghanistan and with the values that you just mentioned. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
It's our honor, sir. Congressman, I always default to Mike. I gotta watch that, but it's good to see.
Fine.
It's good to see you, sir.
Yeah, it's fine. No, look, I was actually just pulled off my bookshelf Sandy Gall's very good biography on the life of Ahmad Shah Massoud, called Afghan Napoleon. You know, he was a fighter for freedom, and the very basic liberties and freedoms that the United States has spilled blood all over the world for the freedom of assembly, freedom of the press, freedom for, you know, to enjoy your basic human rights and have opportunities for your children, are exactly what Commander Massoud is continuing the fight for. And Scott, I know we'll dig into this, but at the end of the day, the reason Americans should still care, and I'm out, you know, in front of town halls and my constituents all the time telling them this, is that what happens in Afghanistan doesn't stay in Afghanistan. And the cancer of terrorism, the cancer of extremism will spread once again, if not checked by people who share our values, like Commander Massoud and his people, and led and supported by the United States of America. And to me, it's as simple as that.
No, well said, sir. And we are actually going to jump into that. But before we do, I wonder if I could go to Commander Massoud. So we saw what happened with the collapse of Afghanistan and Kabul. Many of us as veterans, our hearts broke as we watched the Taliban strutting around in U.S. made gear, driving U.S. vehicles, overrunning the city. And then we've watched their draconian rule assault against women and basic freedoms and liberties over the last year and a half. It's been very, very hard to watch, but I certainly, our hearts go out to those who are living through it. Can you talk a little bit about, Commander, what the conditions are like in Afghanistan right now?
Sure. To explain what is the situation and the condition right now, I can very, narrow it down to this, that probably right now, Afghanistan is the worst place for anybody to live, not just women, for anybody. Unfortunately, as you just mentioned, the draconian way of governing of the Taliban and their ruling, it has turned Afghanistan into a total prison for its citizen and a safe haven for terrorism. That's as simple as I can put it, the condition it is right now. They have stripped the women and the women of Afghanistan from all rights. And every day they are applying more and more rules and more extremist beliefs, which is more and more restricting people, and especially the women of Afghanistan, from having their fundamental and basic right, which is completely against any value, especially including the Islamic values that they're trying to preach it. So unfortunately, right now, the people of Afghanistan are living in a situation that has been unseen, I believe, in its history. And given the fact that Afghanistan has went through a lot of wars and have been through a lot of pain, but never in their history, in the past hundreds and hundreds of years, Afghanistan never experienced such dogmatic, extremist, and such a hateful situation, unfortunately, that a hateful group, a minority of Afghanistan, is unfortunately right now, with the support of international terrorism, are ruling the country, unfortunately. And this is the condition right now. And the people of Afghanistan are not happy with it, and they are resisting. But I can say that, unfortunately, they're doing it all alone. If it was only the Taliban, we would be able to deal with it. But we are dealing with 27 terrorist groups, which Taliban provided the opportunity for them to, to get involved in Afghanistan, and Afghanistan is becoming a safe haven for them. For example, in the latest attack they had on one of our military strongholds in Andarab Valley of Afghanistan, there were evidence, and we have evidence and intel, that even the foreign agents, they supported them with technical stuff, and also there were foreign terrorists which participated in the attack they had against us. So unfortunately, we are not just against the Taliban, but against international terrorism once again.
That is something that I really think that a lot of Americans are not tracking as deeply as we need them to. Legend, would you like to expand on that a little bit before I push over to the congressman?
Sure. Yes. First of all, it's an honor to be here with Commander Massoud and Congressman Waltz. I agree with everything Commander Massoud said. You know, today in Afghanistan, people not only have no civil rights, but even their Islamic rights and human rights have been snatched away from them. There's bans from on music, to going to parks, to public baths, to employment, you name it, there's a ban on it. You might as well call it Banistan at this point. And they're exporting drugs and extremism and terrorism, while at the same time, our government is sending them $40 million every week to their terror-controlled central bank, which is run by a man known as Nur Ahmad Agha, who was sanctioned for financing IED attacks against American soldiers that killed American soldiers. And there is zero monitoring and zero accountability on how that money is being spent.
Congressman, with that perspective in mind, I mean, and we see it. I mean, we get snippets of it on the news, and it's not very heavily covered. But can you offer some kind of insight, just to pick whatever lens you want to look through? But why is there such a disinterest or such a removal from what is happening at a humanitarian, violent extremist level, whatever it is? It just seems that we are literally asleep at the switch collectively. Can you speak to that at all from your perspective?
Well, I think that's a few things, Scott, going on simultaneously. One is, for lack of a better term, I hate this term, but it's war fatigue in the United States, and many people, and I think rightly, look at how much blood and treasure the United States invested in Afghanistan over 20 years. Look at the mistakes that we made there as a government and a military. Look at the corruption that was in multiple Afghan administrations, and really kind of throw their hands up. And you have that overshadowed by the war in Ukraine, by our own economic border and other issues here in the United States. And to an average, American family who's just trying to get their kids off to school and, live paycheck to paycheck, even though I would say what we enjoy here in the United States is unparalleled in the rest of the world. They're simply lacking the perspective, and that's where it takes leadership by people like yourself, Scott, Commander Massoud, and his representatives, Legend, and myself and others who see the growing threat that's once again emanating from Afghanistan. And I could tell you from a congressional standpoint, being a member of the Armed Services Committee, the intelligence community, the American intelligence community is blinking red that Al-Qaeda and ISIS fully intend to attack the West again. They are developing the capability to do so. The UN has publicly announced in several reports that tens of thousands of foreign fighters are migrating to this mecca of terrorism that Afghanistan has sadly become. We just saw the leader of Al-Qaeda, Zawahiri, staying as a guest of the Afghan government in Haqqani, Siraj Haqqani's guest house. So just as the Taliban are showing their old ways when it comes to women and minorities, they have not abandoned their old allegiances when it comes to international terrorism. And the difference now is they have the powers of a state behind these terrorist groups. They have literally billions of dollars of the best military equipment in the world. They have an international airport to export their terrorism. And, you know, just to take it full circle to your point, Scott, we have an administration in the Biden administration that has made a deal with the devil and is asleep at the switch. And I think that's why it's going to take members of Congress who have seen this horror movie before to continue to demand not only accountability for what happened in the withdrawal, but to take measures to prevent, God forbid, another 9/11 again coming from Afghanistan.
Yeah, you can almost see the witness testimony, you know, writing itself as we go through this. And I want to come back to that, Congressman, about accountability and where we go from here. But before we do, Commander, I want to go over to you for a second. You know, it seems like that many of the lessons that we failed to learn, that I started this podcast off with when I told the story in a paraphrased version of how your father and the Northern Alliance and other resistance groups were standing against the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and were trying to warn the United States about this impending attack. It seems like we would have learned our lessons from that, looking backward, you know, learning as I did after the fact, after this horrific attack, that your father was trying to warn us. He was trying to tell us. But it looks to me that we have forgotten those lessons as a civil society and also within our institutions. And I wonder if you could speak about those lessons that we are not remembering that we probably should remember based on where you are.
Sure. With this, I'm going to start with a story. How in 2000 and in 1999 and 2000, a delegation of Americans, they went to my father and they had a meeting, and they were concerned about Al-Qaeda, and my father explained that Al-Qaeda and Taliban ideology are identical. So it is not that, just to consider Al-Qaeda as a threat, but not the Taliban. The Taliban are providing the opportunity for Al-Qaeda to flourish. So therefore, one thing is that if you want to solve one issue, you need to actually consider the both of them together. And at that time, my father tried to warn, and then later, when he had a trip to European Parliament, he also warned about the Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups using this blanket of safety that the Taliban are providing for them in Afghanistan to extend their atrocity and also to be able to cause pain. And let's have this in mind, that for such ideology like the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, they see America as the big evil, and as the sort of the country that which is evil, and their ultimate goal is to try to hurt and try to attack America ultimately. So this is the mentality, this is the ideology, and they want to expand. Their expansion is ideology, that they want to expand this extremist ideology to all across the world, and they see America as the only force which is preventing them and stopping them. And my father tried to warn this, but unfortunately at that time when he was alive, just like, actually this is, once again, as you mentioned at the beginning, it's deja vu for myself too. Because at that time when he was warning about this capability of this cooperation between the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and the ideology that we cannot differentiate, even at that time there was some figures which they thought, no, Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, we need to focus on Al-Qaeda, but not just not the Taliban. But unfortunately, the result was my father's assassination and also the 9/11, which both of them, once again, these two were being programmed and planned by one group and one team. And right now, I see that there is a tension on ISIS. But once again, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and Taliban, they're all two sides of one coin. The ideology is identical. Look at what is happening, because I always, when I speak to press, when I speak to others which are trying to differentiate between Taliban and ISIS or Al-Qaeda, I always challenge them. Give me one example of an action which Taliban does not do that Al-Qaeda or ISIS do, which makes ISIS and Al-Qaeda more extreme than the Taliban. They can't give me any, because the behavior is identical, the belief is identical. From day one, which we resisted because we knew this mentality of Taliban and what is coming. After 1 year and a half, now it is proven that the Taliban are exactly, they have not changed. They're not Taliban 2.0. Actually, they are worse. Right now, the Taliban providing the preparing Afghanistan as a military camp, as a training camp for Al-Qaeda, for ISIS, and many other groups. And sometimes when there are some clashes, it is all tactical. They know that at their infancy, they're very weak and vulnerable. So they need to give in to the will of the world here and there sometimes. But under the blanket, they're working together, and we have evidence. For example, in one area of Afghanistan called Qunduz, ISIS commanders and ISIS personnel are cooperating and collaborating with Taliban on a daily basis. We have evidence of that. So Taliban and ISIS, they're just working together, but they're trying to fool the world that they are fighting against terrorism, while they are the sort of terrorists and they're extremists themselves. So right now, once again, we are at that state of history that the Taliban are providing the country for a much, much bigger problem than what we saw in the 90s and 2001 and 9/11. Because right now, the tools that they can harm the people, the innocent lives, not just like in here, but even across the continents in America, it is much bigger, from the cyber attacks to drone attacks to many other ways of attacking. And they are certainly and surely are preparing, and they're planning, as Congressman Anna mentioned it. And this is something that, once again, we need to warn that the Taliban and other terrorist groups, they are in this together.
Wow. Really profound comments, Commander. And I want to go to Congressman Waltz on this one. Congressman, I'm going to ask you to put your green beret on for a second here.
Got it right over there.
I know you do. I know you do. There's a saying in military planning that says that the enemy has a vote. That's something that our tactics instructor always used to teach us at Fort Benning. We would come up with these plans, and he said, you might want to invite the enemy to your plan, because the enemy has a vote, and the enemy is going to show up in a time and place of their choosing. And I guess what I'm wondering, Congressman, is what in this entire 20-year journey of dealing with Al-Qaeda, ISIS, the Taliban, gives us even a clue that they've changed, or that they are not going to try to strike the West and the United States? I mean, what would cause us to think that way?
Well, again, I think out of desperation to try to fix, what we find in Washington is that someone will have a policy agenda, and then they try to kind of shape the facts to fit that agenda. And in this case, I think it was very clear back from his days as vice president, when then Vice President Biden opposed the surge into Afghanistan under General McChrystal and under the Obama administration. And I think he has always believed the United States needed to just get out, and is now trying to, his administration is trying to reshape the narrative that there are some good terrorists versus the bad terrorists, that the Taliban 2.0, so to speak, have changed and evolved. And to Commander Massoud's point, we can't confuse some local factional fighting like we've seen with the Taliban and ISIS in Nangarhar. We can't confuse that with the overall agenda of Islamic extremism, of jihad, of Osama bin Laden's dream of having a caliphate from which as a springboard to launch his extremism all over the world, which is essentially what we've now handed what we've handed the Taliban, the Haqqani, ISIS, Al Qa'ida, and half the world's terrorist organizations that exist along the Pakistan-Afghanistan border. But we can't also, Scott, we can't also let Pakistan off the hook here, who actively aided militarily with advisors, with equipment, the Taliban takeover, and is still actively aiding these terrorist organizations. And so I think, I think that explains, that hopefully that answers your question of why it's a policy agenda. I think it's misguided. Facts are being shaped to fit that agenda. And just one other quick point, in terms of going down this road before, under the Obama administration, we yanked out of Iraq with no plan, no follow-on residual forces to help stabilize the Iraqi government. And what did we have 3 years later? We had the explosion of ISIS onto the scene, a caliphate the size of Indiana, untold atrocities and deaths across Iraq, Syria, attacks across Europe, and inspired attacks in the United States. And what did we have to do? We had to go back. We had to go back in. And fortunately, though, in that situation, we still had a government to work with in Baghdad. We don't have that in Afghanistan now. We had allies on the ground that were aligned with us in the Kurds. We don't have that really on the ground, with the exception of the National Resistance Front. So should this fiction be proven to be true under this administration, that the Taliban have not evolved, that they are working with international terrorism, that they are going to hit us again, and we do have to send future special operators, future soldiers back in, who are we going to have on the ground to work with? I think from a planning perspective, just to bring it full circle to your question, aside from the humanitarian and just right thing to do standpoint, in line with our values, from a pure national interest, we should have a plan B. We should have allies on the ground as a contingency if this deal with the devil, with the Taliban, doesn't work. And that's one of the reasons that I will continue to engage with Commander Massoud and do everything I can in Congress to shift this administration's policy to support them.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Congressman, because I tell you, this is, I think for a lot of people watching and listening to this, it's very personal. There's probably some who are watching and listening to learn why it's personal. But I can tell you, for me, not only did I, like you, lose a lot of friends over there and a lot of my youth over there, but, the person that you're talking about going back over there is likely going to be my son, right, because he wears the uniform now, in the same way that Ahmad Shah Massoud's son is now leading this fight. Commander Massoud is now leading this fight. Our kids are fighting the war that we couldn't finish, and it's just a matter of time. But I guess, Mike, with that in mind, with that context in mind, and a lot of people listening to this have children now who are carrying the weight of this moral stain, frankly, and what will have to be something to fix it. It'll be our children who will ruck up and go do that. I'm just wondering, like right now, what is your look at DC and the Beltway on? Is there any potential in the next year or two for them to pick up on what we're talking about here, the national security threat, the emergence of violent extremism? I mean, yes, accountability is important too, but is anyone collectively awake there and looking at this with any serious eye?
Well, there are a number of us that are receiving these briefings, and what we need to, in terms of the growing and simmering international terrorism threat. That said, we have to have the assets there. If the tree is falling in the forest, somebody has to be there to hear it. Yep. And so, one of my efforts is to make sure that we keep the intelligence apparatus, the network, the systems, and other things that we need to fully understand the threat and be able to kind of blink red when when they decide to go international using Afghanistan as a base. So, that's my challenge right now. And when you have an administration, frankly, whose senior leadership's heads are in the sand, they don't want to hear it, because that would mean they were fantastically, historically, very publicly wrong. Then I have to make sure that the professionals in the intelligence community and the Defense Department can be heard, so that we can then push those decisions on people who may not want to make them. I hope that makes sense, but that's just dealing with the kind of the bureaucracy of the situation. And, separately, a lot of this is taking the case to the American people. And one of the things that I'll seek to do is to make, Americans aware that there are people still putting their lives on the line to resist this dictatorial Islamic extremist regime that is the Taliban, like Commander Massoud and his team and his followers. So, for everybody listening out there, I'm not going to let this go. Not just for our generation who lost so much, but like you said, Scott, for the future generation that's going to have to deal with this, because this is a generational war, unfortunately. And the bad guys didn't get the memo that it was over. They're still perpetuating it. A lot on the left and the right will say, well, Congressman Waltz, you're just perpetuating this conflict for whatever reason. No, it's Al-Qaeda and ISIS that are perpetuating it. I just want to deal with it before it comes to the United States, and want to help people who are brave enough to deal with it abroad.
Yeah, and as Commander Massoud said, they are operating from the same ideology, one that's committed to striking our homeland as well. Before we get into, I'd like to talk about, and I appreciate it, Congressman, the resistance and what that looks like from a Washington perspective, but also certainly from the commander's perspective. In fairness to, the kind of the way that this war was prosecuted over 20 years, I think it is important contextually to talk a little bit about the Doha Agreement. And, going from the Doha Agreement into the creation of the Islamic Emirates that came after the signing of that thing in Qatar, there's just some political context that I think we need to understand about where we are right now, so that Americans can wrap their head around that. Legend, could you speak to that just a little bit to kind of set that context for us going into the discussion on the resistance?
Sure. Yes. In my opinion, I think the Doha Agreement had its own flaws, because it failed to include not only the Afghan Republic, but the democratic opposition to that republic in the negotiations. I think the Doha Agreement and the whole withdrawal is a victory some can talk about, but it's not a victory you could see. Nevertheless, the Doha Agreement has been violated and breached, and the Taliban have turned Afghanistan into a paradise for terrorists. And I think it's foolish to give aid and intelligence to the Taliban, a group that's known for beheading, killing, and destruction, to fight against ISIS, another group that's known for beheading, killing, and destruction. Simply put, there's no difference between them. They're both evil. And I think it's time we wake up and realize who our friends are in this war of good versus evil, or we will witness a repetition of 9/11, except on a larger scale. And I've said this to you previously, Scott, that the objective of these terror networks does not end with Afghanistan, it only begins there.
Yeah, well said. And, one of the things that in my years of dealing with these groups, Commander, is that none of these groups want to come in second place. They don't plan for an attack for somebody in history to go, wow, that was the second greatest attack on America in history. They want it to be the greatest attack. And I think one thing that we can count on is that whatever is pushed our way from this terror safe haven, if it's left unchecked, they are going to aspire to make it, as legend says, worse than last. And before we get into the resistance, Commander, is there anything about this growth of violent extremism that you are seeing that you would like to, that we missed, that we need to cover, that's important for Americans and policymakers and decision makers to understand?
Sure. Regarding this extremist ideology, once again, I need to emphasize is that their ultimate goal is basically to hurt America, and they see America as the enemy. What His Excellency Congressman said, what my brother Legend said, what you said, we covered a lot of things about these groups, but maybe what is missing is that maybe right now one of the things which is happening is that it's just calm before the storm. They are in the preparation period of time. They're using this blanket of safety that the Taliban provided for them and also the Taliban themselves in Afghanistan to learn, to recruit, and to plan, and then to go on full attack. When it comes to the elimination of Mr. Zawahiri, we called, even we said it weeks and months before that to happen, that Zawahiri is in Kabul, actually, in green zone. Unfortunately, it was being unchecked, and once again, the warnings and everything that we said was not being taken seriously. But right now, I say something that maybe we didn't cover today, is that, yes, Zawahiri as the leader of Al-Qaeda has been taken. However, Zawahiri, even when he was alive, because of his age, he didn't have the same competence or the same capability no more. Right now, there are new bloods with much more ambition, and also knowing the tools of today's world that can harm massively. And they are actually focusing on that, and there are new bloods which is running through the veins of extremism in Afghanistan, and they're using Afghanistan as the safe haven to prepare, plan, and God forbid to attack sooner or later. I need to add one thing to what Congressman said, and also it is something which lately I saw the Rainbow First Blood movie, and in it also he's a Green Beret. He mentions with Colonel about that that the loss in Vietnam was political, and that he says, "Will you let me win this time?" And or they didn't let us win. I can say that I understand war fatigue. I understand the problem, but one thing is that we cannot give in to will of evil. Evil is continuing fighting, and they are continuing fighting. One thing was that we managed together in 2001 with just the aerial support of US and underground, the allies. We managed in a span of 3 weeks to capture Kabul. In 3 weeks, we managed to capture the Kabul, and the Taliban were nowhere to found. But even later at that time, the Taliban announced that we are ready to negotiate, to talk. This is something that we want to say. Evil and extremism, yes, they're very brutal, but at the same time, when there is unity, when there is a sheer determination to confront it, when we combine that with effective planning, just like what we have achieved in 2001, early 2001, together, it is possible to achieve it in early 2002. But unfortunately, one thing is that every day which is passing, the Taliban are stripping the world of their natural ally and their strategic ally in Afghanistan, which they're killing them, they're target killing them, they're putting a lot of resources in moving them, and also they're trying to isolate them. And every day that goes by, we are feeling more and more alone, unfortunately. I heard that Ms. Baker, who represents America and in Afghanistan, and she's currently in Doha, and she said after the atrocity that happened by the Taliban after their new rule that women cannot go to school, cannot go to university, which is completely absurd, she said, "What are you waiting for, the men of Afghanistan?" Well, it's been 1.5 years. We are bleeding. We are fighting. We are screaming that we are here. And every day we are losing someone. in this war. We are standing. Where are you? And this is what's happening, unfortunately.
No, that's well said, Commander. And you know, I hear the same things about, you know, where are the Afghans fighting, and you just addressed that very well. I also want to pass my condolences for your senior front commander, and I hope I say his name right, Karkah.
Yes.
I know you lost him, and he was a member of the AN security forces, and then a member of the resistance, and we want to just pass our condolences, because it is proof positive that so many of Afghans are fighting and standing up.
Absolutely.
You know, Congressman, one other thing I want to point out here, you know, you brought up the war fatigue piece, and I think we should also throw a shout out to, you know, the volunteers, who mostly veterans, who stood up during the Afghan collapse. Some were on active duty still, some were you know, former service members, military family members, even Gold Star family members, Commander, who lost family members in Afghanistan, volunteered to try to help at-risk Afghans you know, find safety any way that they could. And many of them are still doing that. Many of them have cashed in their children's college savings accounts. They've cashed in their 401ks. They're paying for safe houses and healthcare and food drops and anything that they can to sustain the partners that helped keep us alive. And you know, you talk about war fatigue. I mean, I think about that handful of Afghan war veterans who will not hang up the phone. They will not give up on their partners, and it has been a devastating blow to them on the front of moral injury and just you know, mental health. And I wonder, before we talk about the resistance, one, your thoughts on that, Congressman, because you were one of them who did stand up. And you were very overt about it, and it's not lost on the veteran community. But that was a minority, my friend. That was not that common. And what are your thoughts on that? And do you see any way to address this as we go into the next year with the accountability and impact on the veteran population?
Yeah, so I think there's two pieces, right? There's the ongoing, you know, evacuation and assistance to those who stood and fought with us, and then there's the resettlement of those who we did get out. And I could tell you, I'm absolutely engaged on both. To our veterans community, believe me, my heart is broken right alongside you. And I think what has been so frustrating, so damning, is that they had to stand up to do what our government should have been doing. On a bipartisan basis, both Republican and Democrat veterans began demanding, as soon as President Biden announced his policy of a withdrawal, we began demanding to get people out, because we knew what was going to happen if eventually the Taliban took over, that they were going to begin hunting people down, which they have been doing and are still doing right now. And if you look at, for example, what happened with the fall of Saigon, then President Ford ordered a task force dedicated to getting our allies out. There was a dedicated place in Guam for processing. He put the entire weight of the executive branch and the federal government into doing the right thing, into taking care of those who stood and were willing to die with us. That didn't happen this time. Thank God for so many veterans out there on a grassroots level, including you, Scott, who stood up to do it as best as they could without the resources of the federal government, on your own dime, with fundraising, with donations, to get out as many as you could. And I get it. They're not going to let it go. I'm not going to let it go. I don't have a magic solution for that, because it's ingrained in us. It's in our DNA and it's in our blood to never leave a fallen comrade. I will say, please, though, if you're going to a dark place mentally on this, to please reach out. Don't become another casualty because you're so heartbroken over the casualties we've sustained. And, you know, that's why I'm on with you today, to let people know that those of us who have been blessed with some position of influence by the American people are going to stay on top of it as best we can. But until we get a commander-in-chief that is going to change policy, it's going to be a struggle. It's going to be a fight. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. To you know, get some change and change direction from where we're currently going.
No, I appreciate the candor, and I do think that I hope that we can have some more conversations around moral injury. You and I lost a mutual friend. Couldn't take it any longer, and we've got to get in front of this because I think we're on the front end of a tsunami, and so I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But Commander, I know that you've obviously made a stand leading this resistance. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the National Resistance Front, what it is, and why Americans should care about this resistance that's happening right now that seems to be overshadowed by Ukraine and everything happening there. Talk about the National Resistance Front, please.
Sure. After the collapse of Kabul on 15th of August 2021, I had two options to go either outside Afghanistan or stay in Afghanistan. The only place which was still not under the control of Taliban was Panjshir Valley. I went to Panjshir Valley and I talked to the constituency and I talked to the people, and we said, what should we do? And with the decision of the people, our demand was that if the Taliban agree on peace and talk and negotiation, we were going to talk and negotiate and see what is their plan. And when we did that, the Taliban refused any talk. They just wanted surrender and they wanted to kill. When we in that interaction with the Taliban, myself also personally, I gained a valuable experience that the Taliban have not changed, that they do not have any plan for Afghanistan, that they are a force for destruction, and also they are going to attack no matter what should we do. So therefore, at the beginning, as a sort of a defensive factor to defend the people, the NRF was being created last September. However, slowly it grew exponentially with the support of people of Afghanistan across the world and also inside Afghanistan, especially women of Afghanistan, as a front, as a resistance front to fight for democracy, to fight for the people of Afghanistan, to fight for freedom, to ensure that Afghanistan people and Afghan people are having the right to have a dignified life and to be able to decide for their own fate and future. This is, in my opinion, one of the fundamental rights of every human being, to be born free, to be able to decide for their own future. And this is something that the Resistance Front, from the very beginning, started and making it its goal, and we have been trying to fight it. And the Taliban, on the other hand, are a complete totalitarian and authoritarian regime, which is trying to enslave people. And we are opposing that. In this confrontation, the Taliban are being unfortunately supported by many countries outside. Congressman clearly said it and mentioned it, and it is very obvious. And also, they were being supported by international terrorism. And unfortunately, indirectly, although the intention is for humanitarian and the help of the people of Afghanistan, but because there is the lack of any monitoring of the funds and how it's being allocated, how it's being spent, the Taliban are also abusing the $40 million which weekly are coming, and it is actually resulting to their consolidation. So because of that, we are resisting for the free and just in Afghanistan, and we want to have a dignified life in Afghanistan, to make it very simple. And right now, the resistance has continued and has grown massively. The Taliban tried to denounce us, trying to call us fake, but with our blood, unfortunately, this is the cost that we paid. With the blood of our soldiers and our commanders in the past 1.5 years, we proved that we are here. And whatever the Taliban are trying to minimize us, to say they are not real, they are just in Facebook, they are just in social media. But no, we are real, we are fighting, and we are resisting. And in short, this is the continuation of war on terror, which this terrorism right now is holding my country and my people hostage. And as soon as it gets stronger, it is going to trying to reach the other countries. And we are fighting against it to liberate our country, liberate our people. So finally, our people can have a right, can live peacefully, and also our women and girls can go to school. This is unfortunately the sad reality of Afghanistan. Right now, my daughters, my sisters, my mothers, and the women of Afghanistan and the people of Afghanistan having no right whatsoever. What is being like seen as a granted blessing, or as a we sometimes take it as a granted, what the people are seeing, it's such a fundamental right. Who can prevent people from going to school? But in Afghanistan, it is becoming a goal, a hope, a dream. And this is why the resistance front is fighting to free Afghanistan from these tyranny, authoritarianism, and to bring democracy and freedom.
Well said, sir. And you know, Congressman, I'm going to come over to you just for your response to that, because I know that you've got some thoughts on this as you think about the emergence of the National Resistance Front and then establishing some level of sanctuary in the North. Can you kind of speak to that from your lens?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if we look at the fiction of the Taliban 2.0, or the good terrorists versus the bad terrorists, is unraveling with the ongoing cooperation with Al Qaeda and ISIS, with the oppression of women, with the massacre of minorities. At some point, we can no longer responsibly continue this. Again, I call it a deal with the devil, or this bargain that this administration has made with the Taliban regime. And we're already seeing NGOs, international NGOs, pulling out because of this oppression of women and basic human rights. So, where does that leave us from a humanitarian standpoint? Well, I think where we're going to evolve, and I hope as a matter of policy that we do this very overtly sooner than later, I will continue to push for it, is that we have a safe haven in the North, that we have a place where minorities can go for refuge, where women can go for just basic education and life, to be able to live, and that we have people on the ground in Afghanistan from which or through which we can work and operate to, one, keep an eye on the terrorist regime as it continues to simmer and grow, but two, that we can work with should they decide, or when they decide, I should say, to go external from Afghanistan back into its dream of attacking the Great Satan once again. So from a national security standpoint, from a humanitarian standpoint, Commander Massoud, I just can't commend you enough. The easy thing to do would have been just flee and to go live somewhere safely, with your family, and leave the people of Afghanistan, to fend for themselves. But you've chosen not to do that. And in the shining light of your father, you've chosen to make a stand for their freedoms. And I certainly commend you for that. And I think eventually the United States is going to realize the error of its policy and align with people who are aligned with freedom.
Well said, sir.
Thank you.
Commander, I'm going to come back to you for one question. I know Congressman Waltz has to go. I'm gonna just ask you to, if you would, quickly to give us. There are people who say that, Commander, that the National Resistance Front is a continuation of ethnic fighting, and that it will perpetuate that kind of civil war. I wonder if you could respond to that, and if you could give us just some insight. Who is in the National Resistance Front? Who is it comprised of that might surprise Americans?
Sure, absolutely. To this, I need to explain where does it come from? Where does this narrative that the National Resistance Front is fighting for a certain specific ethnicity, not the whole Afghanistan, comes from? It is all coming, unfortunately, they are driven from the two agencies. One, it is the ISI and it is the Pakistanis, unfortunately. And the second, it is the Taliban's propaganda machine. The Pakistan and in the time of the first resistance, also they tried to say the resistance of people of Afghanistan was the resistance of Northern Alliance, if you remember. They called it Northern Alliance. Still to this day, we call it Northern Alliance. It was the terminology that at that time Pakistan trying to preach to the world that it is fight of the North against the South. While as a matter of fact, even at that time, it was a national alliance that a lot of the figures from the South, East, West, they were together fighting against the terrorism. Later, when there was a peaceful intervention in Afghanistan, and there was the intervention happened in Afghanistan by the international forces to help the people of Afghanistan against international terrorism, and the war on terror happened. This is another thing happened, that once again, this propaganda machine, they called it, there is an invasion and we are fighting against the invasion. This is a jihad. That's how they fooled a lot of young people in Afghanistan, or a lot of young people in Pakistan, or across the Islamic world, to recruit or to fight for their own goals, for their own evilish goals. And also, we had a legitimate government in Afghanistan, and the government called Republic, which we came through the election, and the people of Afghanistan elected it. Till the very last day, the Taliban always called it Kabul administration. So the Taliban always have the tactic of sort of minimizing the others, denouncing the others or the rival. It is in their benefit. Right now, what they're trying to do, at the beginning, they said the resistance front doesn't even exist. It's all just in the cloud. It's just in the WhatsApp and it's in Facebook. But with the blood, when we showed that actually, no, we truly exist, now they are saying they're fighting for ethnicity policies, which is completely false. Right now, in our ranks, in our military area, and also in our political area, there are people from Kandahar, from Herat, from Badakhshan, from Takhar, from Parwan, from all across Afghanistan, in different ethnicities across Afghanistan. This could not be more national and more sort of united. And this is another tactic which they are trying to do, and I wanted to explain. And also to a topic that you just mentioned about the Taliban extremism and their relationship with Al-Qaeda, before Congressman go, I don't know how can I share a screen or how can I share a photo with you. Surprisingly, just minutes before joining the call, I was checking my Twitter, and a Taliban personality shared a photo which was interesting that I wanted to show. I don't know if it's possible to share it on Zoom call.
I don't know. Can we do
that? I'm actually not sure. I think, let me see, hold on.
We're going to try it. Congressman, are you okay, or do you need to bounce?
Yeah, no, I'm fine. I need to go in just a few minutes. I just wanted to, while you're figuring that out, I do want to be very candid in that, I've had Afghans come see me, and of course, they're blaming the Tajiks, and I've had others come see me and they're blaming the Ghani government. for fleeing and telling certain army units to stand down, and that accusation. And I've told all of them enough. I've heard this for 20 years, and the disunity between the various groups, has been devastating. And look at where Afghanistan is today. Look at where they are today. So I commend Commander Massoud for pulling in all elements of Afghan society and all of the various groups and making this a national resistance rather than a northern one, because I think that's an incredibly important distinction. These are about basic liberties and freedoms and stopping the cancer of extremism and terrorism. And I think Afghanistan, the new generation, has to evolve beyond that old thinking, that old factional thinking that has been, so devastating to the country. And from a U.S. standpoint, for the very few of us that are still focused on this and see this for the national security and humanitarian crisis that it is, we need to hear that unified front for those who are brave enough to resist the Taliban. They have all of their own factions and problems and internal fighting as well. But at the end of the day, they remained unified enough to achieve their goals. And I look forward to Commander Massoud unifying the resistance to that evil going forward.
Yeah, and that's really, really powerful, Congressman. And I just want to say that as we wrap here, and I'll see, were you able to? There's a way to do it.
You can share, yes.
Yeah, we've got to wait for you to share that picture, Commander. But before we do, I just want to say something that, Congressman, I hear a lot, and Commander Massoud and Legend, a lot of veterans have come to me that served in Afghanistan, a lot of combat veterans, a lot of Gold Star family members, and they have asked, what was the point? Why did I lose my son in this war? Why did I lose my husband in this war? Why did I lose my friend? Why did I lose my youth in this war? And, one of the things, and I truly believe this, is I believe that, as T.E. Lawrence said many years ago, nothing is written. And I believe that the real sacrifice of our U.S. veterans and our NATO veterans has yet to be fully realized. I think that it is in the men and women who had a taste of democracy, a taste of freedom, a taste of human rights, that are now standing up because our war fighters held that space for 20 years so that they could taste it. And, it hits me pretty hard when I think about that. But I think that the true realization of the sacrifice of our war fighters and their families has not been fully realized yet. And my hope is that Commander Massoud and other leaders like him are the ones who will lead us down that road and demonstrate what that was all for, what it was all for, and that we can all, live to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, basically, it is a Taliban personality as showing the Twin Towers being hit by the airplane and saying, like, God bless Osama bin Laden for this. It was just, a coincidence. It's just still they are, and they are, because I wanted to show it, and that it was, it's just
nothing's changed.
How they are so, how to say it, brave to say stuff like that and rubbing it and on our faces with, and being so proud of the atrocity they created, the pain they created, to all of us.
Really well said, sir. Congressman Waltz, we're gonna wrap here. Anything that you'd like to offer for the last word, or any parting thoughts?
Well, to Commander Massoud and everyone taking a brave stand with him, both on the ground in Afghanistan against incredible odds, and then and with him, you have a supporter in the United States Congress, and to so many veterans out there, not only for their moral injury, but their concern, as you said, Scott, about the next generation. I'm not going to wait until we have another San Bernardino or Pulse nightclub, or God forbid another 9/11, to take proactive action to prevent that from happening. So I'm on it. I'm not letting it go. I'm a dog with a bone on this, because this is, at the end of the day, Scott, as you said, we held that space for 20 years so that people there could taste freedom. But we also held that space for 20 years so that a whole generation of Americans grew up not tasting terror, not feeling like we did in the weeks after 9/11, when was the next dirty bomb or anthrax attack or suicide bomber in a shopping mall coming. That's not a world I want our kids or grandkids growing up in. And even though, there are people in Washington who want to pretend like the war on terror is over, I know that sadly that it's not. The terrorists certainly don't believe it is. And this is a fight worth fighting. It was not a fight in vain. It is not a fight in vain. And, we'll keep fighting the good fight, brother.
Okay. Thank you so much, Congressman. It was an honor to serve with you in Afghanistan, and still an honor to serve with you now. You're the real deal. Happy holidays.
All right. God bless.
Legend, any parting thoughts from you, sir, on where things are heading? What have we missed today that we should talk about? Can you briefly talk about how you're approaching the National Resistance Front from an organizational perspective, and where veterans might be able to get involved?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you again. We have an organization that's known as Vets for NRF. It's a US-based organization that's led, supported, and created by veterans, American veterans. Our mission is to encourage the US government to honor its commitment to the freedom-loving people of Afghanistan by enacting specific policies that will ensure Afghanistan remains free and an ally of the United States. And we have an open letter addressed to all branches of the US government, the White House, Senate, Congress, and on our website, vetsfornrf.org, that we ask all veterans to review and sign. And this open letter basically states how we got to this point, what's happening today, followed by a call to action. And we have some recommendations that we believe members of both political parties can agree upon when it comes to Afghanistan. As American veterans, we support the NRF because we see the NRF forces under Commander Massoud has not initiated any aggressive acts of violence against anyone. They have never bombed any mosques. They never killed any American soldiers. They never carried out suicide bombings against children or anyone else for that matter. They never took away rights from the Afghan women. They never shut down any schools. They never attacked America or gave safe haven to those who did attack America. And so it's because of these reasons that we veterans see the Afghan people's resistance as our resistance, and we sure hope everyone will join us in supporting the NRF.
Awesome, Legend. Thank you for that. And I'm sure we'll be hearing more from this group as we move into the next year. And certainly, I can't speak for all of Moral Compass, but for Operation Pineapple Express, Task Force Pineapple, we're certainly at your shoulder on this as you move forward. Commander, a couple of more questions that I just want to give you the opportunity to address, because we're going to push this information out just everywhere that we can. Could you talk a little, because I don't feel like you got to finish your thought on who is in the NRF, and I'd like you to be able to talk about that composition, but also I'd love to hear your vision for the National Resistance Front. What does it look like for you? What does success look like for the NRF?
Sure. Well, the structure, once again, I need to emphasize is that we are on as every movement at its infancy, especially given the fact that we are doing it all alone. And this was a very, very difficult task. But luckily, in the past 1 year, we have achieved something that even we thought it would be impossible. First and foremost, we knew that we are going to survive because our people are resilient and they are not accepting the Taliban. For example, today, as you mentioned, Mr. Khairkha, that we lost 2 days ago an attack by the Taliban. His sons, they called me, they said, we want to pick up the guns of our fathers and we want to continue this fight. They are not being demoralized, but actually such sacrifice are giving us morale. But our end goal in here is to be the sort of the resistance that we were in also in the 90s, to become to the point to create a sort of, to be the pressure on the Taliban, other sort of groups, and slowly to go to the point to liberate the country from such heinous groups which is ruling right now Afghanistan, in creating a space for the people of Afghanistan to be able to to live and breathe in the same atmosphere that you just mentioned, that in the past 20 years we gave them a taste of that. And this is a goal that we want, that people of Afghanistan wants that freedom, and they fought for so long for that freedom. You mentioned about the sacrifices that the people of America, they made in Afghanistan, which we truly appreciated. That's why there is a huge respect and feeling between the veterans, American veterans and Afghan veterans, because they truly went together in this path. One thing is that the people of Afghanistan also sacrificed a lot in the past 20 years. And we saw how it was very difficult for them, but they fought and they sacrificed because they loved freedom. Unfortunately, they would continue this path. Given the fact that I spoke to a veteran about a couple of months ago, American veteran, and he said that since 2016-15 till 2021, span of 5-6 years, the whole casualties of United States of America in Afghanistan was 30-something personnel, which is only in the trainings in America annually we lose such people in the trainings. So the cost of sort of personnel, it was not that high, while the Afghans, they were actually paying a lot of the sacrifice because they wanted the democracy to stay and for it to flourish, and slowly for us to work. And this is the goal that NRF is continuing. And our vision is to help the people of Afghanistan, to support the people of Afghanistan, to give them hope and unify them to rise against the Taliban. And we see it slowly. At the beginning, Scott, for example, like 12 months ago, there were a lot of people who thought maybe the Taliban are changed. They're Taliban 2.0. But right now, there is categorically the people of Afghanistan, they believe this Taliban, they are not good. So the resistance showed that with resistance, with with political activities that we did, with having very successful events that we had, we brought political unity alongside the military unity. However, right now we are a group which is standing independent, but the Taliban are having the support of their strategic partners like international terrorism, also with almost $80 billion of American equipment which was left in their hand. So it is a very unbalanced war. However, as day passes by, more people are joining politically, socially, and also militarily. And our end goal is to create a situation that the Taliban will have two choices. Either they give in to a reasonable and acceptable negotiation and peace and talks, and they understand that the people of Afghanistan, like any other people, have rights to live in peace with each other and with the world. Either they accept that, or they are going to lose this battle. And we are doing it. And we are also doing it not just because I knew when I went to Panjshir that there's a fatigue. I knew the West is not going to help me. And I knew that there is no country helping me. But this is my country, and I love my people. And it doesn't matter who does what to my country. It is my obligation and duty as a citizen to do something for my country. And this is what we are trying to do. And it's great that after 1 year and a half, also the world is seeing the true face of Taliban, and also they're seeing a resilience and resistance against them.
Thank you, sir, for that. I really appreciate it. And I'm wondering, with that in mind, with what you're building, with this resistance that is, with your vision, is to be multi-ethnic and inclusive of multiple regions. I'm assuming also that because one of the things that comes up a lot, I interviewed General Sami Sadat, General Alizai, and obviously they're, one of the things that, yes, the Taliban inherited a lot of equipment that they never should have received. However, there are also quite a few extremely well-trained special operators in that country. Commandos, special forces, KKA, who possess tremendous skill. And I'm wondering, is this going to be something, will the resistance consist of these special operators as well, to include, and then also women who have had the opportunity to live a life that they probably would not have had? Are you seeing representatives from those communities as well?
Absolutely. The backbone of our military structure is Afghanistan former commandos in special ops. And these groups are the backbone of our military groups. For example, one of our great leaders right now inside Afghanistan is Commander Khalid Amiri, who was a KKK, and he was sort of a very prominent figure, and he was a commando, and he's also leading. And just like that, Mr. Khairkho, also he was and for example, and the arms. Just like that, majority of these groups that we are having, they are a part of Afghanistan's former commanders and special ops. There are figures, there are groups which are willing to join us, but unfortunately, we do not possess the capacity. Because one thing which is very important is they're ready to join. But already with the amount of people that we have, for example, we are in the winter, we need to move, we need to mobilize our forces even better than before. We need to make them light and mobile. So to counter the strategy and the tactic of Taliban. To do this, I have to actually ask them that, please, do not join and stay in your houses, stay where you are till the season of fighting comes. Even this, they cry to me, they're like, no, we want to join, but we do not possess, unfortunately, the resources to mobilize them. Some of these are in Iran, some of them are in Pakistan, and some of them, they went outside, but I'm in touch. You mentioned Sami Sadat, I talked to him, and I talked to many others. And we all believe in the same sort of ideology. We believe in the same goal. And for this, I can say surely that the backbone is the commandos, and also we are working in this framework to bring them all together. But it takes slowly, because our resources are very limited, and we need to build upon that slowly. And second, about the presence of women, I can say that right now the civil sort of demonstration of our people are right now, or resistance, the civil resistance of our people are being led by women. And there are many women who are representing us, and they are across the different cities of Afghanistan. They're standing against the Taliban. They went even to jail. They were punished, and they were being abused, unfortunately, by the Taliban. And also, they are our voices outside Afghanistan. So, of course, the resistance framework, as a military right now inside Afghanistan, it is mostly the men of Afghanistan, and the women, they are participating in other ways and methods. However, the political structure, the social structure, it is, I can say that there are a lot of women who are representing the resistance, and they are fighting. And the inclusion or the inclusivity that we have in mind, it is something that we are working in that path, that to truly to bring unity. I can say one thing that they have been always saying, that Afghans are not united, they are divided. I can say that it might be possible last year, but right now, maybe still we are working on the path of creating a vertical structure so to bring sort of a vertical unity. We are not there yet. However, the horizontal unity has been achieved. No one can say that in Afghanistan, the politicians, the elites, the military forces, the former government officials, the scholars, and the women, the men, they have different opinion. The liberation of Afghanistan, the Taliban's not being acceptable, and to deserve a better life is something that categorically everyone is saying the same thing, and they're united around the same values. When it comes to a vertical structure, this is something which requires a bit of a space, Scott. When, for example, I'm resisting, and United States of America condemn me for defending my country and says we do not support a military resistance, or when I do not have any political space, the Taliban, they have Pakistan to organize, to get together, and from there to come. So where can I do that?
Right.
We needed a political space. We needed sort of an opportunity, and we are working every day to bring more and more unity. We had a very successful conference which brought unity among the political diaspora of Afghanistan in Vienna. After that, we had a very a successful conference in Dushanbe, Tajikistan, and it is continuing. And resistance is leading all of these efforts to bring unity and inclusivity, not just for resistance and its structure and its the resistance NRF, but among all the nation together.
Really well said. And this is my last deep question in respect for your time. But with all of that said, Commander, when you think about what you need, I mean, you talked about political space, you've talked about, to some degree, logistics, and you all really are mounting a resistance on your own. I've heard people say to me, you know, that Afghanistan should look at, and these are people who probably either didn't fight in Afghanistan or you just, I don't know, are not thinking it through, but say things like, you know, Afghanistan should look at the United States and how it stood up against Great Britain on its own. Well, there's one little detail is that, you know, we had France at our shoulder assisting us with political space and logistics that probably without that, we would not have been able to resist successfully. And I think you could look at, as a guy who studied insurgencies his whole life, pretty much any insurgency you look at, there's always some form of external support from formal state actors. And with that in mind, I just wonder if you could maybe close out on what is it that you feel like you need the most to be successful? What are the gaps? Because I do agree with Congressman Waltz, everything has a season and it will come back, I think. And so I think it's important to get it out there at a strategic level. What's on your mind about the gaps that you're facing right now? Sure.
I believe what truly the people of Afghanistan need right now is a true pressure on the Taliban by international community, especially United States. And also maybe, I'm saying it because I understand that as of right now, there is no appetite for any military support, logistically or by any means. So therefore, understanding that there are a lot of other elements that the international community, especially United States, can use to put pressure on the Taliban, which weakens them. And it is creating the situation for democratic forces to truly flourish and to be able to take back their country. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, it is not happening. So I believe a more concrete and strong political stance and a united one, which can bring Europe, the region, together to bring pressure on the Taliban and also to bring sort of the political pressure on them by sanctions and many other methods and ways. It is possible to truly weaken them and prepare a situation for a meaningful talk or peace. The other thing is that understanding and not lowering the demands from the Taliban. I spoke with many Taliban, and they said, yes, that we are creating a lot of atrocity, but in the Doha agreement that we had, we never promised the world and the United States the woman's right. We never mentioned of the woman's right. There is no mention of the human's right. There is no mention of the freedom of speech. There is no mention of election. There is no mention of any of these things in the agreement, the Doha agreement. But those things that we agreed, which also they failed to stand even for those standards, them they're just abusing the world, and we need to take them and hold them accountable. If the world support the people of Afghanistan in the resistance, even 0.1% of the support which Ukraine is receiving, we are able to do it on our own to liberate a portion or a part of our country, which can truly bring even internal immigration from external immigration. We would not need any of the more evacuation. And we, the people of Afghanistan, we rather to stay in our country and fight for our country. And also it will be a source of hope to bring the whole people on the street. Right now, one thing is happening. The women of Afghanistan, the men of Afghanistan, they're fighting. They're raising their voice. But recently, a lot of people, they're unhappy with the regards, with the statements and comments, with a lot of the other the foreign entities, for example, the UNAMA's representative, for example, the others, they're doing it or they're saying it, that we need to open our embassies, we need to give the Taliban chance. And these things, it is demoralizing the people of Afghanistan that truly, even the political support are not there. And they think the Taliban are being used as a geopolitical tool at this stage. And that is why they don't care about the people of Afghanistan. So therefore, I believe, understanding the situation, that the Taliban can never be any tool and they will always be harm to all of us. Understanding the democratic force of Afghanistan, supporting for the people of Afghanistan, and also providing a space and opportunity for any political maneuver, it will create a situation that truly we can challenge the Taliban even on our own. But unfortunately, when the condemnations is coming, when there's a lot of the political pressures are coming, it is making things difficult for us as well. So therefore, I believe, to make it very short, a strong political support for what we have preaching for the people of Afghanistan for 20 years, for democracy, for democratic force of Afghanistan and the people of Afghanistan, for putting pressures on the Taliban. Right now, there is no pressure on the Taliban. The only thing they are not having, it is the recognition. And they don't care about that much, actually. And they are having every other means that they like. The engagement is happening, the humanitarian support is happening, and a lot of other things. So I believe we can bring a lot of pressure on the Taliban, and the support, either the logistic support, the political support, and ethical support even, it is something that we people of Afghanistan, we truly deserve. And we're looking at our friends, especially the people of America, and to not leave the democratic force of Afghanistan behind. Because one thing is that Congressman Waltz also mentions that, you mentioned that, is that America, it is not just a superpower, it's standing for a value. And the America value, and this is something that why we fought for 20 years in Afghanistan, it was not just to get rid of a security threat. Also, it was for a greater cause. And that cause was to bring that value. And this is something that truly the people of Afghanistan, they truly want democracy, freedom, and we are standing for it. And we hope that together we can continue this path, because otherwise the image of America, the reputation of America, it would truly be something that a lot of other countries, they would not truly see that, okay, America might come this day and then leave us behind, like what happened to people of Vietnam or what happened to people of Afghanistan. So I believe that one Vietnam is enough. We need to do something now to prevent the further deterioration of this reputation of an America, which is great.
Well, totally understand, Commander. And, you know, our veterans got involved because not only is it the reputation and moral standing of our country, but also the security of our country. As you said, 27 violent extremist groups on the march inside Afghanistan with a strategic precedent of attacking the United States from 9/11, 2001. We know this, and your father tried to warn us of this. And so many of our veterans are aware of this. It's why we got involved when Afghanistan collapsed and continue to stay involved. And so before I give you the last word, Commander, Legend, I want to go to you with what you just heard the commander say. What are your thoughts as you close out, closing thoughts on veteran influence, veteran participation in helping to get the word out, what's really going on in Afghanistan with the resistance and carrying the water as much as we can, as we've continued to do since all of this started? Anything that you'd like to speak to on that as we close this thing out in relation to the organization you're building or otherwise?
Sure, just a few points. I know Commander Massoud touched on this, but I'd just like to add something. I know as a Green Beret, Colonel Man, you've studied the art of war, where Sun Tzu says, know thyself and know thy enemy. Well, in this case, we know the enemy like we know the back of our hands. But we also know history, and history tells us that if France hadn't come to the aid of General George Washington, things might have been very different here today in America. But France did support General Washington, and America resisted. And look at the end results today. We're a powerful, proud, and a free nation that's ready to help those who seek freedom for themselves. And today, we have an opportunity with the NRF in Afghanistan. You know, I think resistance needs resilience just as much as it needs resupplies of ammunition. You know, we have resilience, but what we do not have is $86 billion worth of weapons, but our enemy does. We don't even have $1 billion worth of weapons. You know, we're not getting $40 million every week in cash. Our enemy does. So I would say, let's turn the table and let's start a trust-based, mutually beneficial partnership. You know, in my personal opinion, serving under General Joseph Votel and of CENTCOM, I would say a CENTCOM liaison to the NRF is also a very good place to start that could provide non-lethal support. NVGs, thermal, clothing, surveillance equipment, or some of the basic things every resistance requires and needs. You know, and on the political sides of things, I think after the Vienna and Dushanbe conference, a Washington, D.C. conference on Afghan peace talks led by the NRF is also a very good place to start. So let's start there. Let's start somewhere. And like we veterans say, if not now, when? If not us, who? And finally, I would say that if the free world does not support the NRF, then in a sense, the free world will become less free and evil will prevail.
Got it, Legend. Thank you for everything that you said. And what I will just echo there is that from at least my perspective and working with Task Force Pineapple and all of the evacuation things that happen, I do still think there will need to be specific evacuations for particular at-risk individuals. But where my head is going right now, and I've said this openly, and I'll continue to say it, is that getting behind the resistance and really being as loud as we can about the importance of the resistance in Afghanistan. That really is the way forward. Evacuations of people in duress. I mean, it was timely when it happened, and there should still be some measure of that in my assessment. But I also know that the resistance is where the real solution resides within Afghanistan. And I can tell you for my piece, that is where I will really start to become more and more vocal in the public space, I can assure you. And of course, standing at your shoulder, Legend, and Commander at your shoulder, I'd like to give you the last word, Commander. Anything that we talked about, we're a little over your time here. Anything that we talked about that we didn't cover today that you would like to put out there? The floor is yours for any closing thoughts.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all the viewers. I'd like to thank the veterans for all the sacrifices. We want to say that we are continuing that fight. We are continuing that struggle against the same evil that unfortunately this time we are doing it alone. However, and surely we are continuing and we are resilient. We are not going to give in to this evil. However, unfortunately, if this continues, our fear is that we are going to be here, we are going to continue this fight. But maybe the time will come, the world will realize that once again, they need to intervene and support, but then by then it will be too late. And let's Laden to sink in that when my father warned the world, if at that time the support would come, and if at that time the world would pay attention, we would not have the 9/11. We would not have the past 20 years of the sacrifices, and we would achieve to the goal that we have without all of those, the money, the sweats, and the blood. However, we lost that opportunity, and look how much we paid for it. Right now, there is an opportunity. For example, we have the opportunity that we can create inner coup within the Taliban, and we have the possibility and the capacity to disrupt the terrorist groups from within, and we have the capacity to mobilize the people and to unify the people. However, all of these things, it requires, as you mentioned, support. And we need to tell to the people that, look, the world is standing with us because our path is right. Because the democracy that we have been preaching to you, the freedom that we told you, it is the right path. Right now, this is something that we need to show. That even as my brother, he mentioned Legend perfectly, even with the slightest of support, the slightest of even ethical support, it is something that would truly change the atmosphere. And I could guarantee you that with the slightest of support and the opportunity that we have on our hand, because one thing is that the Taliban, 10 years ago, they were preaching to the people, and the Taliban that after 1.5 years and the way that they got and they ruled the people understood the true nature of Taliban. They touched it with their skin, and they saw, they saw it with their own eyes. So right now, if anything happens, you will see that the people of Afghanistan will tear them apart, and they will not let them. Right now, the only reason that maybe the majority are silent because they see no hope, and on the horizon, they don't see any support from outside. The smallest and the tiniest of support, if it comes and shows, you will see huge changes in Afghanistan, because that is how the land and the people are ready for a blink of hope.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I really appreciate you being on here, and I will tell you that on 9/11, my Ranger buddy Cliff Patterson was killed in the Pentagon, and he never had a chance. He went to work that day, he was killed, and we had been friends for years. And just as the war began very personal for you, I can't imagine what that was like losing your father just days before 9/11. I lost one of my best friends on 9/11, and it became very personal for me. And I think about what you just said. It's had we listened to your father, had we just taken the counsel that he offered so freely, my friend would still be alive, and his sons would still have a dad. And so many of my friends would still be alive, and so many of my buddies would not be maimed and their souls scarred by the brutality of war. And, we can do that all day long, but I think there is a wisdom in what you said, which is we've been here before. We've seen these actions before. And as Legend says, we all know this enemy like we know the back of our hand. And that's why so many veterans continue to be involved in this, and so many veterans continue to speak loudly against this while the rest of our country seems to want to turn the page. But what I will tell you is we're not going to let them turn that page. We're going to continue to tell this story and influence this in every way possible. And you just need to know that we stand at the shoulder of Afghanistan, and nothing is written, and there's still our best days are in front of us. And I really believe that. But the resilience for this resistance, the resilience really does also need to come from external. It needs to come from people who believe in what you're doing, and we'll continue for our part to do that, sir. So thank you for being part of this podcast. Thank you for leading the resistance. And I hope we can stay in touch in the future, sir.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll be always here. And thank you very much. God bless you all. And let me to close it out with one, because it's the Christmas was here, and also now the New Year. And I wish you all a very happy New Year. We have a poet who was very famous. His name is Rumi, and in one of his story he mentions of Jesus, peace be upon him, that he was fleeing to the mountains, and they told him, Jesus, aren't you the one who healed and brought actually a dead to be alive? He said, yes, I'm the one. He said, are you not the Jesus who is the most powerful? He said, yes, I am. Are you not the Jesus who made all sorts of sicknesses to be healed? He said, yes, sir. Then why are you running away? Where are you going? He said, I'm running away from the idiots and from those who are not understanding anything, those who are closing their eyes. Right now, what we are dealing in here in Afghanistan is just the way that Jesus was running away from those. We are running away from these people who do not believe in any principle. They do not believe in any morality, not Islam, not like democracy, nothing. So we have no choice but to defend, to stand and resist. And the resilience is there and resistance is there. And I have no doubt that we are going to be victorious. Absolutely, surely. I know sooner or later, maybe I'm going to be dead by then, or maybe I'm going to be alive. But in our victory, I'm 100% sure. If the world support us, it's going to be much quicker and sooner. If not, the end result will be the same, but a lot of people will get hurt, not just in Afghanistan, but also in America.
It will follow us home, sir. And we as Americans and citizens of the world, we have to ask ourselves where we're going to stand. You've already made your decision on where you're standing, as have many Afghans. But, you know, learning what we learned from 9/11, 2001, we have to ask ourselves that question. Are we going to go with the culture and just turn the page because it's easy? Or are we going to look at history, and are we going to listen to the voices that are in the fight right now and choose wisdom over, you know, blind ignorance and stick our head in the sand? I hope we choose the former. I know what I'm choosing, and I know that so many veterans will continue to choose the same. And it's an honor to be at your shoulder, sir. Happy holidays.
Thank you very much. You too. Thank you so much. Take care. God bless you.
Yes, sir. And to everybody listening, thank you so much for being part of this special edition of Rooftop Podcast. Make sure you share this with as many people as you can, regardless of your politics, regardless of your political affiliations, or you know, pro-war, anti-war. What this really is about is taking a hard look at the threats that we face in this world, understanding that there is evil in this world, and that there is precedent for the application of evil, and it is regenerating as we speak. And you just heard from the leader of the resistance in that country, and it's something that bears paying attention to. So I hope that you'll share this podcast widely. I hope that you'll think deeply about it, and I also pray that you're led to make a stand in your own way, even when it's hard, because that's what our veterans did when Afghanistan collapsed. And they showed us what leadership looks like. And now we have the opportunity to build on that and make our voices heard for something that is a resistance lesser known, but one that will visit us at home. I guarantee it, in ways that are almost unimaginable if we don't stand and be counted. And that's what we're about here at Rooftop Leadership. And I hope that you'll do the same. Thanks for what you do. Happy New Year. And I'll see you on the rooftop.